Well, good morning. So, week to gather together for the purpose of worship, but also for the purpose of encouragement. No matter what happens to us throughout the week, we know that our tanks are depleted more than they are filled, and yet it is good to be with God, and it's good to be with God's people, and it's good to be able to pour into one another. It's good to encourage each other, and it's good to be together. So I'm grateful that you are here. To our guests, we are truly grateful that you are here with us as well. And we hope that your time with us will be equally encouraging and uplifting to you. And wherever you may be on your spiritual journey, that if we as a congregation can be of a help to you, we want you to reach out and let us know how we can support you and encourage you and help you. So, we find ourselves in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And every year or so that I've been with you, I've done a lesson or two on what we've entitled In the Meantime. Because our life at this moment is bookended by at least three major holidays. We have Thanksgiving, where everybody gets together and we just feast, literally and in every sense of the word you could imagine. And then we all just come crashing down, and we come back to real life, only to go back out into Christmas, into New Year, and our life is just kind of just in that mode of moving from one major event to this next major event. What do we do in the meantime? And it's hard. If you're our kids, it's hard because you're looking at all of the presents. You've made your list. And if you haven't made your list, on behalf of your parents, make your list. And they can get that taken care of and all the other things that are needed for that. And that's for us as adults as well. If you haven't made your list, now's your time. Clock is winding down. What do we do in the meantime while we're waiting? Now for us, we're thinking, well, there's shopping to do, there's a menu to plan. Again, if you're traveling, well, there's travel plans. And if we're making travel plans, then what route are we going to take? Who's going where? Who's coming when? And then if they're coming here, we got to make a plan of where's everybody going to be? Are they going to stay with us? Where's everybody going to be? And everything is just about planning. And that's how we are utilizing our meantime, in addition to school, in addition to work, and in addition to all the other things that maybe you as an individual or family has. You know that the Bible will treat for us, especially the New Testament, that as Christians, that since the moment that Jesus was resurrected from the grave, that we have been living, all of humanity, whether we recognize it or not, all of humanity has been living in a meantime moment. Acts chapter 1 and verse 11, as the 11 apostles have finished their conversation with Jesus and he has ascended back into heaven, angels come down and they just have a conversation with them that goes like this. Why are you standing around? Why are you looking into heaven? This Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. Our meantime moment is Jesus has ascended, and now we are waiting for him to come back. And as we ask the question about what do we do in the meantime between major holidays, well, what do we do in the meantime between the significant event of the resurrection and the significant event of his return? What are you and I supposed to be doing in the meantime? Are we just sitting around? Do we just pursue earthly things? And of course, the answer is no. The New Testament would tell us that if we have repented and have been baptized, we have been made new in the image of Jesus, which means that our thinking and our living is all different. We transcend what is earthly at the moment. Oh no, we can't leave our bodies. We still have to live in this flesh and blood and all those things, but as we are being shaped and conformed in his image, we start thinking in different ways. The meantime is so much more than just shopping. In the meantime is so much more than making a list. In the meantime is so much more than even family coming or going or whatever that may look like in the next several weeks. That the meantime, as we wait between Jesus' ascension and His return, the meantime is that we get more and more spiritual individually and then, of course, collectively. So what happens if we sin in the meantime? What happens if we sin in the meantime? That's what our scripture reading was about. And this is what this sermon will do for us. The Apostle Paul begins his practical section of the letter to the Galatian churches. Churches comprised of different areas, going through different things. But he knows that as they are waiting for the return of Jesus, that we don't stop being human. And that we are going to make bad decisions. And that we are going to make mistakes. Now the Bible will not leave it in terms like that. It will call it sin. It will call it transgression. It will call it iniquity. Because mistakes and bad decisions are so much more spiritual than what we could ever imagine. And they stain. And they wound. And they hurt. And so Paul, as he's talking to the churches of Galatia, as he talks to you and me this morning by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, when that happens, what are we supposed to do in the meantime then? What happens when it becomes, we become aware of that within the family? What do we do in the meantime when sin takes place? And I want to just go through a couple of movements with you in this brief section, and then the lesson will be yours. He begins this way in verse 1, brothers, if any one of you is caught, some of you have the version that would say overtaken, overwhelmed would be a good way to imagine this. If you are caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in the spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. And I want to begin at the end. Now, one of the things that what we want to do on an individual basis as the spiritual people being conformed to the image of Jesus is that while we're waiting in the meantime, we want to keep watch on our souls. But we want to do it on an individual basis. I need to keep watch on me. I need to keep watch on me. When we're little, those of you that have little ones now, or you remember all the times that you had with your little ones, you would say, watch out. Watch where you're going. Be careful. I think you spend more time as a parent when they're little trying to keep them alive than you are doing anything else because you just are seeing everything. Like these become more, these sharp corners become more noticeable. When you have little ones and grandparents, you're probably being re-immersed into that. If they come over to your home, you're being reminded, but you're constantly saying, watch out. You're constantly saying, be careful, because you see something that's happening. Paul, first and foremost, before we talk about us corporately, speaks of us individually, that one of the things that we need to do in the meantime, while we're waiting for Jesus to return, is to keep watch on ourselves. That we need to make sure that we are walking with Jesus as best as possible. That we are walking in His light and we are walking hand in hand with Him. Now, Paul will say a little bit later in verses 3 and 4 that if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself, which is a side note. Self-deception is the worst kind of deception that we could fall for. But he said if we think we're something, sin and transgression and iniquity don't always happen because we are prideful, but at least pride is one of the ingredients that plays a role in what happens in sin in our life. And so he says, here's why you watch out for yourself. That just because you came out of the water and you're a new creature, you got new focus, new priorities, so forth and so on, it doesn't mean you're going to stop being human. You're still going to have some of the same weaknesses. Being conformed into the image of Jesus is not something that happens instantaneous. It's the rest of our life. which is why the New Testament emphasizes so much of grace and mercy and patience and so forth and so on. But it gives us warnings as well. And one of those is be careful with pride, because pride exposes us. How many times have you heard this week, and I'm sure it's coming this next week, just looking at the temperatures, don't leave pets exposed. Don't leave your plants exposed. And if even us recognizing how cool it is, even as cool as it was this morning, we're going to make sure, yes, we're clothed, but we're going to have a big jacket, have thicker socks. We're going to make sure that we are insulated as best as we can, because we don't want to be exposed. Just like plants exposed to freezing temperatures, pets exposed to freezing temperatures, our soul can get exposed by pride. And it can leave us damaged. So Paul says, keep watch. And as a side, as we move through, I would leave you with this thought: when it comes to sin, when it comes to transgression, when it comes to iniquity, the meekest man who ever lived, as far as the Bible records, is a man by the name of Moses. And he fell for sin. The strongest man was Samson. And he fell in sin. The wisest man was Solomon. And he fell in sin. It happens. So keep watch. In the meantime, keep watch on yourself. But when sin happens, and it will, because again, we are human, and we're not always going to keep watch, then as a family of God, in that moment, a decision has to be made. What kind of family will we be when that happens? So Paul says, again, brothers, if anyone is caught in transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in the spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. And what I like about this, and I want to do two sides of the same coin, if you will, and we're all going to couch this, we're going to frame it in terms of attitude. When sin happens in my life, and I'm going to say this while our defenses are down, and we can receive this, because it's hard to receive this when it's happened in our life. It's hard to receive what I'm about to say in real time. When someone comes to find me after I have fallen into sin, that person is not being mean. That person is not being judgmental. That person is not being hateful. That person is not coming so that they can shovel dirt. And that person is not coming so that the wound that sin has created in me can get bigger and wider and deeper. And I say that because there are types of people that it's near impossible to talk to. It's near impossible to talk to someone who knows everything. It's near impossible to talk to someone on the other extreme who believes nothing is wrong that's happening. And it's near impossible to talk to someone who knows that there's an issue that's happening and they don't want to hear it. And so a charge is levied of judgment or being unkind, not being loving. That may have happened in your life. But as we were reminded in Bible class, just because someone did that doesn't mean that everyone does that. If sin happens in your life at any point in the meantime, please don't dismiss the person who comes out of love to bring you back to Jesus. Please don't regulate them to a back seat, assuming that they're being judgmental or mean-spirited, or all they want to do is be critical. See, as a church, that's not who we want to be. Because on the other side of that coin, Paul says, you who are spiritual should restore him in the spirit of gentleness. This is why we decide what kind of family we're going to be, because when that moment happens and an injury has taken place to the soul of an individual, someone that we love because they are a brother and a sister in Christ, we are told how to approach. You who are spiritual, not you who are perfect. You who are spiritual, not you who got it all together. You who are spiritual, not you who know everything that the New Testament teaches. You who are spiritual. You who are walking with the Spirit, being led by the Spirit, producing the fruit of the Spirit. You who are spiritual, knowing that I too was once on the other side, and when someone came to me, they didn't lecture, they didn't heap, they didn't harp, they were just there. And maybe it took some time, and maybe it took a couple of conversations, and maybe it took months, maybe even for some of us, when we were injured by our own sin, maybe it took years for you to be back in a building like this, in a setting like this. But he reminds us that there will be a time in the meantime where we need to look out for one another. We need to go seeking. The room full of 99 is here. There is one who is missing. We're going to be in the position to go look for them. And when we do, we are not looking for them because we've got it all together or because we're perfect or because we've got all of our ducks lined up in a row. It's because we want them back with Jesus. Which means that we remember two things, that the goal is restoration. The goal is to be restored. If you're not with Jesus today, the goal up front with you is that you would be restored to Jesus. That you would be back with Him. That you would be back walking with Him, following Him, loving Him, being everything about your life about Him, not everything else, because in those things we never find life. That's the goal, and as a family we remember that. But you know what makes or breaks that goal more than anything else? It's the attitude that we would bring. No doubt that many of us cross bridges on our way here this morning. We'll cross bridges on the way home. There's one bridge that matters more than any other in this passage, and it's the attitude of gentleness that we bring. So I don't know how many of you remember after we had moved here, I think it was about a year after or so, our daughter fell and she broke her elbow. We didn't realize this. It just wasn't caught on the initial x-ray and other things, and so she had to spend the night with a broken elbow, and none of us knew. I mean, we just didn't know. But just every time she moved, you just know, you can envision what happened. And finally it was caught, and we were able to get it casted and all of that. But I'm reminded that sometimes we drop things and break them. I didn't break it, so it's like, but I'm reminded, maybe that is a spirit thing in all sense of the word. Sometimes sin just breaks us, and how we treat it determines how it's healed. I know that when I watched the doctor taking care of her after it was discovered that she had a broken elbow, that her arm just wasn't being flung in every direction. I remember a soothing tone. I remember very careful hands. I remember that when they were cutting off the cast several weeks later, that the same mentality and attitude was brought. If we would do that for bone, how much more should we do that for soul? If we would do that for a ligament, how much more should we do that for a heart? If we would do that for something else of this human body from a physical standpoint, how much more should we do that? And the answer is we do that much more because when we were shattered, when we were cut, when we were wounded, Jesus came and healed us. And He didn't heal us by constantly berating us. Yes, sin was pointed out, and Jesus pointed it out more than anybody else. But He didn't point it out so that the wound could get deeper and harder to heal. He never did it for that reason. He did it because He knew, as the great physician, this is the problem, and I'm here to fix this. The family of God must have the same attitude. That's why the older translations, instead of gentleness, meekness is what's translated. Because meekness is strength under control. And restoration needs strength, but it doesn't need a strength that just adds harm to injury. The warning is given to the Galatians in the previous chapter that if we're not careful with this attitude, if you bite one another, if you devour one another, watch out that you're not consumed by one another. I love the food image because we're about to do this in 35 minutes or an hour or so at home or in a restaurant. We're going to just eat. But we're not going to be concerned. We're going to take a knife to that food. We're going to take a fork and just do something like this. We're not going to really care about what's that as long as this is taken care of. Paul gives us that image. Be careful that you don't bite each other and devour each other. And be careful that you don't cut each other. And be careful that you don't wound each other. And be careful that you don't do any of these things. Consumption is not the goal of the family. Restoration is the goal. Consumption is the goal of lunch. Consumption is not the goal of the family. Restoration is the goal. Restoration doesn't happen if we add more hurt than healing. And meekness and gentleness is what helps us. So in the meantime, what we're going to do is help and not hurt. That's why Paul says this as we wind down, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Best way I can describe it, a couple of weeks ago we were helping and we moved a couch. Everybody loves moving couches. Everybody loves moving couches alone. But it's just a reminder because I just knew this was coming down the line. There's nothing more awkward and bulky and hard than moving a couch, love seat, chair, you just name it. It's just awkward and difficult and sometimes frustrating, especially when you add corners. Sometimes the best thing that we can do is grab the other end of the burden somebody's carrying and just say, I'm here to carry with you. No, I'm not here to carry it for you because you got to get your end. But I'm here to carry the other end. When sin happens, we know sin is never by itself. We know isolation comes. We know guilt comes. We know shame comes. We know embarrassment comes. We know all of these things come. We know sin in of itself is the greatest burden, but it's not the only one. Sometimes the family just comes together and says, you got one end? Great, I'll get the other end. That's what it means to carry the burden, and I'm doing it because of the law of Christ. Not a rule that sits here on the wall that tells us the rules of the family or the classroom rules, but because there's something greater and deeper that we're committed to. And that's this, that the whole law is fulfilled in one word: you love your neighbor as you love yourself. I want to restore because we want to restore because we love. We want to be gentle because we love. We want to make sure that people know we're here to help and not hurt because we love. We're going to put in the work to have a gentle and meek attitude because we love. We're going to keep watch on ourselves because we love. We're going to make sure that we contribute to an atmosphere and a culture and an environment because we love. Because we believe relentlessly that Jesus is the answer. And love removes me out of the way so that He can truly be the answer. I don't want you to just be restored to me, and we don't want you to just be restored to us. We want you to be restored to Him. Love is the greatest bridge. It's the greatest bridge. That's why we're committed to it. Mind, body, soul, and heart. And I think Jesus spoke of all four of those when He was asked, what's the greatest out of everything? When sin happens in the meantime, let's meet it with love that leads to gentleness, that ultimately leads to restoration. So here's what I'd like for you to do as we stand in just a second. take that inspection, keep watch over yourself. Let's put that into practice as we stand here and sing in just a moment. What needs intentional focus? Where have I not been keeping watch? And where is it that I need to submit so that both the Lord and I can watch together? If it's so be, maybe today's the day for me to be restored. Maybe today's the day to come home. And not wonder whether the family is going to be mean, because we're not. We're here to love. Perhaps today is the day for you to rise and be baptized and wash away your sin and respond to the good news of Jesus. And perhaps, just perhaps, because we are family, maybe I'm looking at someone who has fallen. And it's been a few weeks since I've seen them. Maybe even a few months. How can I gently restore them? Maybe somebody will be brought to heart and mind. And before this day is over, you'll start that bridge building. May we do for each other what Christ does for us always. If you have a need, why don't you come as we stand and sing?